Well, here we are. Rotten Tomatoes has critics score 89%. That surprises me.
Yeah, that surprises me too.
Yeah,
It was a lot higher.
weird. I don't know who gave it. I mean, I know Alan gave it very positive. 97% audience score. I think audience score is the only one that matters. So I think that's interesting. I'll find Gladiator here. Others, Badger, Rob, Script. Let's get your thoughts.
I didn't watch this movie because it is the definition of not made for me. I just want to say, though, I am very happy that despite what maybe you thought, because what the actresses said, that according to Steph, who I heard vividly defend it, it's very accurate to the books and stage play, and that the only ideology here is what was always there, and it's done very well, and I'm very happy people got something good. Now, can we please do that for all of our beloved male-led franchises? Thank you. Please and thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Rob?
Well, I look, 2 years ago at CinemaCon, they showed a very early preview of some of the behind the scenes on the film. And it was apparent then what a handsomely mounted production this actually was. And to me, I mean, how do you not look, I can understand people not liking musicals because it's not exactly a form that we've been getting a lot of. But in terms of Hollywood history, I mean, you know, go back to the Broadway melody movies of the 1930s. I mean, musicals have always been a mainstay of Hollywood. It's we as audiences sort of let that fall into the past. But, you know, we've seen great musicals. I loved La La Land, for instance. And I thought this movie was beautifully made. I mean, there's nothing about this movie that wasn't first rate. And, you know, it was a little, I went back and forth on Twitter with people that's like, well, I didn't like the film grade. It should look like, and I'm like, you don't think the filmmakers spent weeks grading the color of the film? I mean, this film represents exactly what we want out of Hollywood. The love and the respect poured into this, call it an IP. It was a book. It was a musical on Broadway. Now it's a movie. And I can't imagine any other film getting as much love. I mean, Chicago in the early aughts got this kind of love. This gets this kind of love. I mean, this is what great filmmaking at the studio level should always look like.
Let me address the film grading for a second. But, you know, I saw it on IMAX and I saw it at a regular theater. IMAX is far superior in terms of color. I would definitely say watch this on IMAX, watch it in Dolby, because the regular theater, it just felt washed out. It looked like the images you see on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, that's a projection issue. And this is something that I wish people would understand. If you go see a movie and you think the color grading's off, it's very possibly a projection issue. And what happens is the theaters diminish the what call it the lumens. Would that be the right thing to say?
Yeah, it saves money. It literally saves them money
because the projector bulbs are very expensive. And if you're going to see, and I understand that, but that's the last place that they should be skimping, even though it's the first place they do.
Plus, these theaters are run by high schoolers, so
yeah.
I saw it for the first time in 3D because that was like the early access screening was a 3D showing. I wouldn't waste your time with 3D. It really doesn't make a difference. But I've seen it 3 times already, and I will say I've seen the Broadway show 5 times, and it is a love letter. I mean, it is just straight from the Broadway show to the big screen, Act 1. From the songs, the pacing, even the jokes and the mannerisms of a lot of the actors, it is pulled straight from the Broadway show. This is a 1-for-1. Like, if you loved the Broadway show, if you had fun with the Broadway show, you will absolutely just adore this movie. This movie is it's a beautifully made movie from start to finish.
$1 billion, Steph, but not. It's like it's going to be good, but how will the second one do? I think you said that maybe
a couple big things. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Okay.
I'm wondering if the second one's going to do as well as the first one. It might do well if they continue with the momentum, but I can already see reactions to the marketing for this movie because Wicked is everywhere. Yeah. And that's led to some like consumer negative reaction because they're like, everywhere I turn, it's Wicked. It's I'm getting sick of it. Like, okay, your movie's coming out. And so since the next movie is coming out next year, is the marketing for the movie going to continue throughout the year leading up to the second movie? And some people might just be sick of seeing Wicked everywhere, that they just won't go and see it. But like the people that loved the first ones, the first movie will go and see it, but it'll like taper off and people won't see the second one, especially since Act 2 tends to be the weaker between Act 1 and Act 2, between the two.
Right. But I don't think they're going to have to advertise as much. There's a lot of word of mouth going on. The other upside is they don't have to rebuild sets. So the production
They
costs
shot them back to back, right? They shot them back.
Yeah, and so the cost overall is shared between the two. Also, to Steph's point, one of the criticisms I have of movie musicals, movie adaptations of musicals, is that movies fail to capture the intimacy that you have with a live performance on stage. And Into the Woods is probably the great example of this. Into the Woods is awful.
Oh, good.
Because it couldn't capture the magic of the musical on the stage. Here, I believe that the added scenes, the expansion of story characters, of emotional arcs within the story, overcame the inherent weaknesses you have with these adaptations. Another reason why I think, yes, this movie is going to be a lot longer than the musical, and I think it's the added material that makes this movie come close to the original Broadway play.
Also, added material is needed because, in the Broadway show, there's just music while they change the sets. Whereas in the movie, there's just more dialogue and you get further in depth with each character and how they're feeling. And I just have to say, like, all of these characters, they had such great chemistry with each other. You believed they killed it with the acting. It had such great chemistry. You felt every emotion.
I'll point out that the arc between or the story between Bach and Nessa Rose, it gets really dark, and you don't get that in stage play at all.
Yeah, it's just a great fantasy film too. I mean, I would go so far as to say this is one of the great fantasy films of the last 25 years. I mean, because it's a musical, people might not think of it in terms of Lord of the Rings or something, but there's been a lot of fantasy films that have missed the mark. And that's another thing about this movie. It's a genre movie in addition to being a musical. And I think it's quite an excellent genre film. So
what's interesting to me about that, Rob, it really quick is, there's a lot of people who are saying that, they don't want to see it because they're not a fan of musicals. They don't like musicals, but yet they love the original Wizard of Oz, which is a musical. Right. I think people forget that.
Yeah.
The original Wizard of Oz is an actual musical too.
No, the pushback against musicals has always baffled me. One of my favorite top 10 movies of all time is All That Jazz. Now, I wouldn't consider All That Jazz a musical, but it's a Romano Clef about Bob Fosse, who was a choreographer and a film director, and I also think it's a fantasy film. But this movie, I think anybody who loves big studio productions would love this movie. Why not? I mean, if you love Lord of the Rings, you would like Wicked.
I think that that Cats left a really bad taste in a lot of people's mouths.
For sure.
Yeah.
In adapting a musical to a movie production, it left a horrible taste in people's mouths, and they're like, well, see, this is why you can't adapt musicals. You can't do it properly. Look at what happened with Cats. And they're right. I mean, Cats is very hard. It's very hard to adapt to the big screen. Yes, I agree with that. And I think that left a lot of a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And I think that's why, like, very few people didn't want to give Wonka a chance. Wonka was excellent. It was such a great movie. Yeah. And that's why it took so long for that movie to be successful, because people weren't willing to give it a chance. And I think that one, word of mouth, helped that movie. But I think that, like, in terms of like big Broadway production musicals, Cats left a bad taste in people's mouths. And when they think of a movie musical, they tend to think of Cats, because that got such bad press and such a bad reaction from so many people. That's the one thing that people think of when they think of movie musicals.
What's weird? I was one of the few reviewers that give Cats a positive review, and after giving that review, I have had people come out of the woodworks and say, "Yeah, we liked it too." So.
Well, Alan, you're fired. So that's
I really liked it, Chris, if I'm not mistaken.
I did. I walked out. Was I with you, Dante? Who was I with? I just like
no. I never saw that shit.
Yeah, it was bad.
I mean, movie. I never saw it.
I do like musicals when they're well done. West Side
Yeah.
Story is amazing.
Amazing.
There's so many
I love
great
West Side Story.
I liked Moulin Rouge and Phantom of the Opera, so there I'm slightly gay too.
Les
I just could not do
Miserables
this.
is fantastic. Les Mis, I think, is great. You know, there are many versions of it, and
I
I've
love-
seen that play as well. But I think what makes this special to me is the connection to Wizard of Oz. And you know, those slippers were silver in the book,
Yes.
right? They made them ruby in the movie, but they don't have the rights to the movie, but they have the rights to the book. So there's confusion there. They changed it for the original version, 1939. You know, they made them red to feature the color on the big screen. So there are lots of little.
They made
changes.
them red to pop off of the yellow brick road.
Right,
They needed something
exactly.
to pop off of the yellow brick road, so that's why they're red.
Yeah.
They're originally silver. They've always been silver, but that's why they made them ruby slippers so that they would pop off when, you know, Dorothy is wearing them. Your eyes always go to the ruby slippers, so that's why they made them red. But they don't have the rights to the ruby slippers, which is why they are silver. And even in the Broadway show, when Elphaba casts a curse on them, you know, or a spell on them, the light, they shine a red light on them while she's casting that curse, so that they appear to be red or ruby, but they've always been silver.
Weren't there red shoes in the movie though? I thought they grabbed a pair of red shoes.
Yeah, Glinda grabs it when she's singing Popular. It's like a
that's
nod to the Wizard of Oz, a nod to the ruby slippers, but they're not.
And this is the most time we've ever spent talking about Wim's shoes on the Film Threat channel here. But look, I also like it, and I'm glad Rob's here for this. When I first saw the Wicked play, what struck me most is I always feel the story of Anakin's fall to the dark side was mishandled and just
100%.
not well defined. When you ask anyone why did Anakin turn to the dark side, there are 10 different answers. In this, it's such a great story. You see from Elphaba's point of view why she made that turn and how she was vilified. I thought this was so well done. Couldn't they have told the story of Obi-Wan and Anakin in this way? It's so clear. And the fact that they became rivals, that became friends, and then at odds because of circumstances. And all I thought, this is the Star Wars prequel I wanted to see, but it's being told with the Wizard of Oz players, I guess. So I'm really curious with the second half, because I don't think the second half of the play is as good. And it kind of weaves in between, happening concurrently with the events of, the Wizard of Oz, right? So I think
Young Jedi. Still Jedi.
I think John Chu has an opportunity to make that second half better. Seriously. So
I hope so, because there's a significant time jump from the
Right.
first half to the second half of the movie.
Well, you know what they're going to do? They're going to make sure that, Chani isn't the way she is at the end of this first movie. They're going to change that relationship. So
You're right. Sorry, everything comes back to Star Wars for me, and
I've heard so many weird things about why people don't want to see this movie. Like another thing I heard yesterday on George's show was some people are angry that they're making the Wizard the villain, and I'm like, guys, you have to understand, man. Like when it comes to Oz, this isn't like a lore thing, because there's so many different stories of Oz and so many translations of Oz. And even if you took the original Wizard of Oz movie and you look at a movie like Return to Oz, they are different tonally. They are different in every sort of way, man. The Return to Oz is more like the books. The Wizard of Oz was its own thing on the big screen, right?
But also, we determined that the wizard was sort of a. Didn't you come up with the snake oil salesman?
Yeah, he was a friendly
Yeah.
man.
That's how he
Right there.
Original movie.
He was
By the
always
way,
a con man anyway. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
the villain.
What's
wasn't-
interesting to me is that the Wicked expands on that, right? Because he has always been a con man. He's always been a snake oil salesman. He just people called him a wizard, so he's just like, oh, I'm gonna stick with that, right? He didn't correct anybody. Nothing.
Well, that's why he stands behind that giant mechanical head.
Yes. But Wicked just expands on that, right? So they're like, okay,
It's also used as a
the real world,
euphemism,
he's gonna
right?
Put some real world views onto.
But Wicked's also a parody. Like the whole idea of the Wicked book is that it's a gimmick of this is the real story. It's like the true Hollywood story from the Wicked Witch of the West's point of view.
Right.
Was never meant to be a canon thing. It's just like, let's take all the canon stuff, let's have fun with it, and make people doubt it. Like they did this with other stories too. They did this like with the Big Bad Wolf and the Three Pigs. His story, like this is the perspective from him. This is what they did. The thing is, Wicked does it really, really, really well. Like I'm seeing it this weekend with my girlfriend. Didn't get a chance to last weekend. So I mean, it seems to be a great audience and crowd pleaser, which is what we need right now. So I'm looking forward to how they do it. I saw it on Broadway when it debuted. It was fun. I want to see how that translates to the screen.